joy that is in the room. And share your joy with others in the room. So being on your sacred ground, feeling connected to your joy, with your mind open, your heart open, and your body open. Be the joy that you are. And then please slowly open your eyes and be present to this moment and this space. So with a show of hands, how many of you were able to experience joy? Good. How many of you were able to expand that joy? Good. How many of you were able to be touched by the joy in the room? Great. So how are you feeling? Hot? But joyful? Well, today I want to talk about leading with the heart, so I thought it would be good for us to really get in our hearts and be joyful. I want to address 5 topics, and then I want to do an experiential exercise at the end to integrate those topics. As I mentioned, I'd like to talk about self-love, compassion, innate goodness, authentic connection, and boundaries, and how they all tie together, which allows us to live and lead with our hearts. So, I'm going to talk about self-love first. What is self-love? Well, it's a hard topic I've discovered to talk about in our culture. This is a culture where we're taught to put ourselves last. This is a culture where we're taught that other people are more important. This is, I call this the S culture, the culture of saviorism, scarcity, shame, sacrifice, suffering, and selfishness. Anybody know those S words? Okay. So in this, it's very complicated because in our culture, whenever I try to talk about self-love, the main response I get is, no, we can't love ourselves, that's selfish. We're supposed to love others more. And it's very complicated because what is love? We have one word for it, but it means many different things to many different people. And in the Tibetan culture, they have many different words for love because there are many different meanings to love. And we get confused, is love a noun or a verb? So in really talking about self-love, it's very difficult, and I like to address it as a state of being from which we act. So it is a being first, it's a beingness first, and then it is a doing. And unfortunately in our culture, we're so busy doing to prove that we're lovable that we lose that connection to innate goodness and to love. So the way that I define self-love when I'm working with people is I define it as a sustained connection to who we are in the moment, honoring our wholeness regardless of all the static out there around us, everything that's coming at us and everything that's disrupting our present moment. So it's the ability to know our value, our strengths, our talents, our abilities, our inner knowingness, our body wisdom, our emotions, the flow of our energy and creative expression, as well as owning our beliefs, conditioning, projections, limitations, and learning edges. It's being able to stand here or sit there and remain connected to ourselves, to have that sustained connection to who we are in this moment, honoring our wholeness, regardless of what's going on out there. So that means we have to know ourselves. We have to know our strengths and our limitations and own them. So if we're having a crabby day, anybody have crabby days? We own that we're having a crabby day. And we don't make ourselves wrong for that. We don't judge ourselves. We don't beat ourselves up. We don't tell ourselves to be different. And we don't put it on someone else. We don't blame them. We don't expect them to change our crabbiness. We just own it. We're important. So as important as everyone else, not more or less, we are important. So where we're at in the moment is important. And we need to own it. It's a difficult thing in our culture to do because it's not really something we're taught. We're always taught to focus outside of ourselves. And there's a really good example of this. A friend of mine was telling me a story of, he's on the board of Seek Care, which is at Stanford. It's the Compassion Center where they do a lot of research. And he was saying they put together a program for Westerners to help them. It was an 8-week training program to help them initiate compassion. So they did this program at Stanford with students and at Google. And they used a Buddhist practice where you start with self-love. Once you have that experience in you, you then extend that to someone you love dearly, a child, a family member, or spouse. Then you extend that to someone who's an acquaintance. Then you extend that loving compassion to someone who is neutral, you may not know. Then you extend that to someone you are having difficulty with or that you dislike. Okay? So they put the students and the people from Google through this 8-week course, and it didn't work. They couldn't figure out what happened. So they went back and they did some research and evaluation, and what they realized was that the individuals couldn't understand, because they started with self-love, what that experience was in our culture. So they reworked the program. So the program now starts with, you feel the love and have the experience of loving kindness for the person closest to you, a child, a spouse, whoever. Once you get that feeling, that experience, you then apply it to yourself, and then to a friend, and then a neutral. So that was really telling for our culture. That was hard for us to even know what it was to love ourselves. So much of what we consider love, what we're doing for others, isn't really love. It's about proving that we have value, proving that we are needed. Okay. So it's important to understand that in our culture, self-love is a little rocky. And Brene Brown, she's a social worker, a scientist in Texas. She's got a great YouTube video, TED Talk, called The Power of Vulnerability. Her recent book is entitled The Gifts of Imperfection. And she talks about practicing self-love and the research that she's done. And this is what she says. She says, practicing self-love means learning how to trust ourselves. It means learning how to treat ourselves with respect, and it means learning how to learning how to be kind and affectionate towards ourselves and others. So practicing love means learning how to trust ourselves, meaning staying connected to who we are, trusting what we know, trusting our experiences, trusting our body sensations, trusting our experiences. And it's about learning to treat ourselves with respect, seeing and knowing ourselves for who we are, and allowing others to be who they are, and not allowing ourselves to be disrespected. And to be kind and affectionate towards ourselves. So to be just as kind to ourselves as we are to other people. My husband has said to me, I think the Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself, right? And he says, that explains a lot. He said, we don't love ourselves. We're really mean to ourselves. That's why we're so mean to our neighbors. And I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, that's right. You know how cruel we can be to ourselves? Yeah, we do turn that around and extend that. So, in the sustained connection of really knowing and honoring who we are in the moment and allowing ourselves to be there, we won't stay there forever. We move and change. So if we're having a crabby day, the next day we probably won't be. We might be having a joyful day. But staying connected to who we are in the now and honoring all of us, even our limitations. That is self-love. I had an experience, I remember the day, it was April 14th. I woke up so angry, I had no idea why. I was angry. And my husband and daughter in the house, and I said, I am angry today, just letting you all know. Stay out of my path. I'm really angry, I have no idea why. And I didn't waste time trying to figure it out, because that would have taken me out of my experience. That would have taken me into my head, where I would have analyzed and judged and tried to fix. I stayed with the anger, but went on with my day. I tried to do something in the yard and the hose was broke, made me angrier. I tried to do something on the internet, the router was broke, made me angrier. My daughter said, I think I'm gonna go to my friend's house. I allowed myself to be angry, I owned it, I played with it, I didn't direct it at anyone, I let everyone know, and I got through the day. And the next day, I was great. I have no idea why I was angry. Although I did hear Mars was doing something conjunct or something, so maybe it was astrology. I don't know, it doesn't matter. I loved myself enough to allow myself to be in that state that day, and I played with it. And my husband and daughter played with me. All right, so what is compassion? I really want to stress the difference between compassion and empathy, because this has to do with the boundaries. So when we're born, we have something called emotional contagion. There was some work recently done by Tanya Sanger, neuroscientist in Germany, and she did some research about compassion and empathy. And it actually, they light up in different places in our brain. They're very different. And she found that with the emotional contagion, when we are infants, we will express the emotion of our caregiver or another child if they start to express an emotion. It's a contagion. If the baby next to us starts crying, we start crying. This is a good thing. It teaches us to be aware of other people's emotions. As we mature, we develop empathy. Empathy is where we actually feel the other person's emotions. Okay? This is also a good thing because we start to be concerned and considerate of other people's emotions because we actually can feel them. Empathy is where we take on, feel, bring in another person's emotion into our energy field in our body. But as we mature, we then learn what compassion is. And compassion, and we need empathy, that's part of our developmental stage. But what compassion is, it is the ability to understand and acknowledge another person's emotion, but keep it outside of us. We don't take it in. It stays outside of our energy field in our body. But we are aware, we acknowledge, and we have compassion. And compassion is the loving kindness that comes through us and out to them. It is a gift we give to others. It is loving kindness extended to them. Empathy is when we take in their emotion, and when we do that, they don't have it, and we're trying to fix it or feel it for them, and there's nothing we can do. It's theirs. Okay. And the Dalai Lama, I've had the opportunity over the last 3 years to spend time with him several times in small gatherings with neuroscientists studying compassion and contemplative practices. And he recently said, we were with him in Mayo, and he recently said that he doesn't believe we suffer from compassion fatigue, which I don't know if any of you have heard that term. It's a term being used. He said that's not possible, because when we have compassion and we are extending loving kindness to others, it is given back to us. We receive more compassion and more energy, and we would actually feel more energized. He said what we suffer from is empathy fatigue, because by taking in other people's emotions, we drain our own energy.